This video comes to you in 3 parts. Part 1, welcome, hello. Part 2, a review of the first episode of House of the Dragon that will not spoil future plot points. Hey, so did you know there's a new dragon show? Yeah, everyone knows. Except for this guy, I think someone forgot to tell him. Anyway, it was pretty great, so instead of taking the piss, today we'll be taking the bliss, if that's alright by you lot. There's a lot to love and some to dislove, so let's hit it. House of the Dragon opens with a big dumb meeting, echoing the big dumb meetings that made Game of Thrones a cultural icon. Already feels like I'm at home. But instead of people randomly shouting their motivations at each other, we have some introductory narration by Princess Rhaenyra. In the book, this council is a super interesting, very involved event, but it makes complete sense that they would gloss over all of that for the start of the show. After all, the show isn't about old King Joe's succession, it's about the struggle over who's going to succeed Viserys. So why include this scene at all? We'll get to that. Hold your horses. Dragons. Whatever. First, I want to commend how immense this feels. I know it's a simple, obvious thing to give your opening scene some space to breathe, but when you spend 3 years molding over the last season of Game of Thrones, simple, obvious things stand out as magnificent by contrast. Anyone else catch that the music when Viserys is announced as heir is a union of the king's arrival and the main Game of Thrones theme?
Iron Throne.
That alone is a clever piece of composition, but beyond that, the king's arrival is connected to House Baratheon, and Rhaenys is of course half Baratheon on her mother's side. Pair that with the appropriate grandiosity of the scene, the absolute drip on old King Joe, and the subtle reframing of the scene I'll talk about eventually, and you can probably understand why from these 2 minutes alone I was impressed. You can probably also understand my outrage at the lack of an opening credits and title theme tune, but apparently that's being rectified in the next episode. They just wanted to cut from cold open straight to the first scene proper. Fair enough. I'll definitely be combing through the new theme the moment I hear it, but now I'd like to talk a little about how they've changed the council. Here, Rhaenyra tells us Rhaenys is Joe's oldest descendant and Viserys is his oldest male descendant. While this is true in the book as well, Vagon and Sarah notwithstanding, it's sort of incidental and not the relevant point put forward by Rhaenys and her supporters. The primary argument in their favor is that Rhaenys' father was the first son and Viserys' father was the second son. Their secondary argument is her husband's bank account. But explaining primogeniture to the audience in the first 2 minutes would be a weird way to open the show, and furthermore, they made it explicitly and entirely about gender. Oh no, I said the Angie word. We'll talk more about that stuff later though. Corlys later brings up some other reasons for Rhaenys' claim, so this reframing doesn't remove any context, it just puts it in a place that's more appropriate for the audience. Joe says that Viserys was voted for by all the lords paramount, which is a departure, although he probably just means that the realm overall has chosen Viserys. Or did they? Those sneaky maces are up to it again! Overall, I think it's a great cold open to hot D. Tepid D. I'm sure we'll figure something out. In keeping with Blisstake tradition, I would sing the opening theme tune, if I had one! But in lieu of that, I'll instead sing Toto's Africa. You didn't think I was actually gonna do that, right? It's gonna take a lot to drag me away from you. Oh hey, it's 10 years later. Good to see you still here. There's a title card explaining how these people and events relate to Daenerys, and it's a little much for me, like, I get it, but it makes sense they'd do this for all the people watching who literally knew nothing about this. No, Grandma, you're not gonna see Khaleesi. Go back to bed now. Then we have our introduction to not just Rhaenyra, but also Syrax, the new dragon design in general, and the new Old King's Landing. And much as me here at Glidus tend not to focus on the visuals, let me be the 1 millionth to say fucking oath this looks fantastic. Sapochnik did it again, and everyone else involved. The amount of thought put into individualizing the design of each dragon comes off so well, especially with the best boy, my spicy noodle monster Caraxes. We meet some dragon keepers, and again, you'll have to forgive me for pointing out simple shit, but look at how this younger guy is so clearly like a trainee dragon keeper. The older one stops him from approaching Syrax, and he's clearly very nervous in contrast to his mentor's confidence. You'll notice that they say Dohyrus to Syrax, which of course means serve in High Valyrian. They brought Con online Giga Chad David J. Peterson back for this, and you can tell. All the Valyrian dialogue sounds as naturalistic as it ever did. Putting the effort in to make your fake languages believable is something only the most desperate of nerds might appreciate, and I do. Rhaenyra takes off her glove using her mouth. This is probably bordering on asking why the curtains are blue, but think about that for a moment. Blink and you'll miss it, but before she's even said a word, you kind of get the idea that Rhaenyra is not too concerned with dignity. Contrast that with Alicent, who immediately reeks of poise. We get a bit of rapport between the princess and her swan shield Harold Westerling before they make the trek from the Dragonpit to the Red Keep. King's Landing looks better than ever, and again, I appreciate that even with the billion things that need to happen in this pilot, the setting is given time to breathe, to feel like a real place. I can't believe it took another 200 years before someone thought to turn this courtyard into a map. Alicent and Rhaenyra hold hands in public like the pair of harlots they are. We meet Queen Aemma for realsies, and she's for real pregnant, positively glowing, or negatively. From the very beginning, we are shown that Aemma is not the focus of this pregnancy.
Here you are, surrounded by attendants, all focused on the babe. Someone has to attend to you.
Then we're hit with the comparison between warfare and childbirth.
The childbed is our battlefield.
Aemma has this resigned attitude towards her position in society as a baby machine, whereas Rhaenyra is more reluctant to accept it. We'll see how that goes for them.
Now take a bath. You stink of dragon.
This just makes me wonder what dragon smells like. The clear comparison is horse, but like with fire? I don't know, it sounds cool. Straight to a smaller, more councilier meeting, where King Viserys is working on his Tight Five for the Red Keep Chuckle Hut. But a comedian's best friend is a drunk audience, and Corlys Velaryon is sober as a stone, so he's only interested in Essosi merchants gobbling up his precious trade routes. I do like that they've gone for a hyper-focused, driven, no bullshit character with the Sea Snake, but I'd have liked to see a more grandiose introduction for him. He's a legendary adventurer, after all, and his mere presence at the small council initially raised at least one of my eyebrows and a number of my fingers. He should really have it out for Viserys, right? Given that from his perspective, Viserys usurped his wife's throne. But nah, maintaining a position at court makes sense, as we see right here he does use this position to further his house's interests, and he later tries to push Rhaenys' claim to the throne again, so yeah, all good. He talks about the triarchy, which I think is an effective use of this screen time. They could have written dialogue about anything here, because the focus is on Rhaenyra's late arrival to the meeting, but they chose to make it about this. It's an efficient, natural way of introducing a conflict we'll be seeing in the future. Lord Beesbury is concerned about the cost of Prince Daemon's upgrading of the City Watch. Nobody gives a fuck, Corlys keeps bringing up his thing, and then we hear Otto Hightower speak.
The Crown has heard your report, Lord Corlys, and takes it under advisement.
And holy shit, did the delivery of this one line absolutely reel me in. When we saw Tywin as Hand in Game of Thrones, it was only ever the Child Kings who he could dominate with relative ease. On the other hand, Otto, who is so much like Dancer's Tywin, has to work around a grown man for a king. A weak, emotional man, but a man nonetheless. So this immediately held me to attention. Otto is commanding and confident and ruthless like Tywin, but Tywin had basically ultimate power. He was effectively the king. But as many have pointed out, Otto has flakes of Littlefinger in him, given that he has to play coy and manipulate things with more subtlety than Tywin would. I only ever knew Rhys Ifans as a comic actor, so I wasn't so sure about this, but this one line had me basically convinced. That's not to diminish the performances of others. Paddy Considine absolutely stole the show for myself and many others, Sian Brooke was great, Emily Carey impressed me, and we'll get to Matt Smith soon. The story needs Rhaenyra in the council room, but giving her a seat on the council would undermine the theme of power in gender relations, so instead they've made her the cupbearer, a subservient role that still gives her a vantage point to sit in on important meetings. It seems so fucking obvious when you see it or say it out loud, but effective writing so often does. The conversation moves to the impending tourney, and the writers work this in.
The Maesters capable of rendering an opinion free of conditions, are they now?
At the same time, they're setting up an upcoming scene depicting the squabbles of the council, characterizing Viserys as naive and giddy, Corlys as serious and disciplined, and we see Rhaenyra's reaction to Viserys declaring that Aemma is carrying a son. an heir. I froth it, but I can see how it might be a bit busy for some, especially those who are just now coming into this setting. If you haven't read Fire and Blood, I'd love to know how the pacing of these scenes sat with you. By the way, we later see Corlys pour his own wine, so this could either be that he wants all his wits about him for this meeting in particular, or that he mistrusts Rhaenyra, or simply that it's too early in the day for Corlys to start drinking. Harold escorts Rhaenyra to the throne room. The Iron Throne has undergone a massive makeover since the Dragon show. Here in the Dragonur show, instead of it being just kind of a chair made out of a few swords, it's bigger and there's more of them. It looks dangerous, and the swords lining the space in front of it are a clever compromise from the book description of the throne. I like how it has like escape routes too. You can sort of picture how, over time, this throne became the Game of Thrones throne. Daemon is introduced to us seated on his brother's throne, and he speaks of how it could one day be his. Immediately, we're aware of his willingness to bend rules, including committing treason just for a sick intro, his ambition for power, and his disregard for danger. Before he said anything, he and Rhaenyra speak High Valyrian to one another. Having actors speak fake languages always runs the risk of sounding atrociously stilted, but it seems that Alcock and Smith have put the work in. Like most people, I was skeptical about Matt Damon, but yeah, turns out the guy we knew was a really good actor is actually a really good actor. They talk about the plot a little and kind of establish a flirtatious, incestuous rivalry concerning their positions relative to the crown. Daemon initiates creepy incest level 1, so Rhaenyra now has a Valyrian steel necklace. Wonder if you could kill a White Walker with that. In the Red Keep's Godswood, Alicent and Rhaenyra chat beneath a weirwood. In both book and Game of Thrones canon, such a thing does not exist there. King's Landing is only 100 years old, and the Andal invasion would have destroyed any weirwoods in the area, so I don't know. With George on staff, it seems like a really big error to make, if it is an error. That's why I have some faith that there's a reason for this, considering that the ending of this episode plays up the relevance of magic and prophecy and all that shit, so maybe the old gods are way more pertinent in House of the Dragon than they are in Fire and Blood. It's either that, or they just cynically added in a visual symbol that the audience would understand and connect it to Game of Thrones. Anyway, that's a paragraph about a tree. Bit of a Tolkien moment there. In fact, I'd better speed this up. We're only 12 minutes into the episode. I know this scene is super cute, but please, I am begging you, do not ship them. It's for your own good. Now, instead of literally anything else, Alicent and Rhaenyra are talking about Nymeria, a powerful woman who instituted genderless succession in Dawn. I'm not sure if this is an ad for a show that doesn't exist yet. Rhaenyra tears a page out of the book that would have taken so fucking long to make, and Alicent appears to be worried that they might get expelled from wizard school. Viserys has a wound of some sort. Cutting oneself on the Iron Throne is a time-honored tradition of subpar kings, and Viserys cuts refusing to heal might be a sort of symbol of how power can eat away at you. It's fucking gross, but that ain't shit compared to what's to come. Otto demands that this be suppressed. Melos and Otto seem to like talking to one another and keeping things between them, whether it's just Melos or a broader maester thing spiracy, there appears to be some mutual understanding going on here, an alliance of motivations maybe. The king visits his queen and, like an annoying co-worker, he starts rambling about a dream he had. Emma recounts all the failed, difficult pregnancies she's been through in an effort to give Viserys a son, and says this is their last shot. I really like
This family already has its Visenya.
as a cute little world-building touch. Even people who have no clue who Visenya was will understand what this means. For a complete change of scenery, Matt Smith in a wig assembles his terror police to do some terror policing. Poor horsey, it's not your fault that legal systems prioritize punitive action over rehabilitation and social safety nets, unless it is your fault. 1812, #AHAB. God damn, Daemon's helmet goes hard. I've seen a lot of people say that this feels like a completely disorganized night of terror, and while I can see how it can come off that way, I'm pretty sure it isn't. Like, the Watch go into specific houses and drag out specific people, round them up into this big square, then deal out the summary punishments. In the next scene, Otto's goal is to besmirch Daemon as much as possible. If this was an all-out assault on innocent civilians at random, you'd think he would mention that. Instead, Instead, he just says it was a big roundup of known criminals. I will pay that a little demonstration earlier on of crime in the city would have gone a ways to making this clearer, or they could have had some more "I know you, you're that crime doer" moments in this scene. As it is though, I don't think it's too big a problem. Although, you know that little bit where this guy's little bit gets excised? Yeah, there's a fucking stock sound effect of a fart. No! Is this a joke put in by an audio engineer? Did they think it was subtle? I love this shot. Overall, the scene's purpose is to show you Daemon's power and capabilities, and it achieves this. It transitions smoothly into the next council meeting where Daemon is waiting for Otto and Viserys. As if you needed any further indication of Daemon's character, note that while all the other councillors stand when the king enters, Daemon is glued to his seat.
Carry on, you were saying something about my impunity.
I already love the button pressing Daemon has for Otto. The rivalry seems so natural. Like, of course Daemon is the only one irreverent enough to damage Hightower's pride. Also, check out these bowls. They seem to be identity markers for the councillors, and I'm not sure what they'll be useful for, but they're a neat invention for the show. Each councillor's is bespoke, by the way. Check out this one. Neat. Anyway, Otto attempts to hold Daemon to account, but the prince is too slippery with his words and evades any chastisement from his brother. I particularly enjoy how Hightower instantly interrupts Lord Strong like he knows Daemon could lead the council to his own conclusion, so he's not going to let that bullshit be entertained. Then there's Viserys jumping at the very first opportunity for conflict to be averted. Hightower tries to get Daemon out of the city altogether. Dr. Bees gives us a wonderful and the doctor pushes Otto's wife button. Viserys tells him to not feed the trolls.
You know how my brother makes sport of provoking you. Must you indulge him?
Or what I said. Yeah, whatever. And Otto pipes the fuck down for a bit. I love the shit-eating grin on Daemon's face after this. He won the argument by pissing the other guy off. Anyway, I think this demonstrates the nuances of this trio's dynamic. In Game of Thrones, we saw very few small council meetings where there was actually a king present. Robert barely ever showed up to his, same with Joffrey and Tommen, who were in regencies, and Cersei seems to not even have a council. So our Tywin stand-in, Otto, can't simply exert his power over everyone else. As I said earlier, he has to resort to more underhanded means to get what he wants. God, just look at this swagger. Daemon is so mad he's gonna have sex with his girlfriend so he won't be so mad. But thinking about his shaky status as Viserys heir, not even that works. This sulky, vulnerable side of Daemon is a completely different layer to his character. He's crying into his paramour's arms because he wants attention and recognition from his brother. Mysaria mentions that he's the wielder of the Targaryen heirloom Dark Sister, and he's the rider of Caraxes, the Bloodworm, a ferocious beast unparalleled by any other currently claimed dragon. So he's the world's most dangerous warrior and most intimidating dragon rider, and yet this smarmy, cocksure, violent, all-powerful prince just wants to be loved. Aw. Mysaria offers to get Daemon a young girl with silver hair because she knows he would like that. You know, someone who is basically his niece. That's so cool of them. I think we've gone straight from level 1 to level 36. Up next is the tournament, and this is mostly just a set piece for spectacle, and there's not much to comment on, so we'll skip right ahead to the next scene. Emma gives birth, and again, we're pressed for time, and I don't really have much to say, so we'll just shuffle right along. Ooh, this scene has a dragon in it. Let's talk about that. A dragon. After this, I remember that comedy comes in threes, so it's time to drop it and actually talk about these scenes. The tournament is such a phenomenal setting for world building. Hang on a silky smooth moment. Is that it is? Viserys has the thing. You know, the dagger from the thing. Later, we'll talk later. I like how Rhaenyra is consistently late to everything. These stands are built from stone, so it seems like this is a permanent fixture on the outskirts of the city. Neat. Look at all that heraldry. I'm a heraldry goblin, so this is heaven for me. Look at me, gobbling all that heraldry. We meet Criston Cole, who unseats this Tarly dude. The exposition surrounding him is completely natural because of course Rhaenyra would ask about this guy. Boromir Baratheon calls Rhaenys the queen who never was, because I guess he's got two massive exercise balls underneath that armor. Or rather, he just knows that Viserys isn't the type to punish itty-bitty little treasons like that. Rhaenys calls Boromir cousin, but in the book he's her uncle, so I don't know what that's about. I like this cute little look between between Rhaenys and Corlys, and their little Statler and Waldorf moment later. Anyway, Boromir gets fucking demolished by Criston while Rhaenyra and Alicent spill some tea, and we get an inclination of the violence that could happen in these events. Targaryen drumskins! Get your Targaryen drumskins here! Not sure why this guy is repping the Blackfire merch, but I'll get behind that awesome hat of his. In fact, kudos to the hats all around. I especially respect all the plumes on the helmets. Daemon rocks up in his absolutely mental Valyrian steel helmet, and look at his goddamn horse too. He's so much. Obviously, he's in dire need of something covering his face, but even the rogue prince can't outdo the sheer goofiness of Gwaine Hightower's great helm. No notes, 10 out of 10. Perfecto. Be better if you could keep it on though, mate. So the hot D himself humiliates Otto's son, love his reaction, then gets Otto's daughter's favor. Again, he's an absolute master of pressing this guy's buttons. Just then though, Mellos tells Otto about a thing. He tells Viserys, who goes off to tend to his hysterical wife. Yeah, so turns out she's gonna die. Hopefully she makes a full recovery. The tourney continues with, oh, hopefully they make full recoveries also. Look, is it a bit much that so much murder is just a part of the tourney? Yeah, probably, although we've seen this sort of shenanigans depicted before in this world. Should a war break out over these deaths? No. For all we know, these are just knights in service to these houses, not actual sons of House Stark or whatever. Wait, what are the Starks doing at a tourney? As if to parallel that scene? We cut to Emma struggling with this birthy stuff. Mellos tells Viserys that Emma is for sure totally gonna die for real gone wrong, but the kid might make it if they, brutally fucking murder her. Earlier, Viserys talked about how rare it is for a maester to offer an opinion without condition, and Mellos did exactly that here. That's why he immediately believes him. Well, Vizzy wants that kid, so crocodile done deal, mate, let's get to it. Nah, he clearly struggles with the decision, but not so much as to consult his beloved wife over it. See, Emma doesn't have any agency here whatsoever. Her status as a human being is not relevant. Her body is a factory that turns royal spunk into royal punks, and that's all it is to this system. We cut back to the tournament where Criston and Daemon now face off. The framing and color of everything sort of indicates that this is a good versus evil showdown. The chivalrous, dashing underdog Sir Criston playing his odds against the ruthless, legendary fiend Prince Daemon. But we've already seen that there's more to Daemon than just a self-interested schnoz nozzle, so maybe there's more to Criston too. Instead of asking Emma what they should do or telling her what they plan on doing, Viserys just tells her,
They're going to bring the babe out now.
and then we're in a horror movie as she's callously yanked down and, you know, murdered. Of course, Shian Brooke is outstanding in this. Now check this out. Daemon loses the joust, but then he resolves to get what he wants by getting back up and beating Criston. Viserys loses his wife, but then he resolves to get what he wants by doing this emergency murder/primitive cesarean. After finally acquiring what they want, both brothers then lose what they fought for as if it's some sort of cosmic joke. Daemon loses on the man's battlefield of combat when Criston defeats him. Viserys loses on the woman's battlefield of childbed when his son doesn't make it. Both brothers are left emasculated, and all with utter disregard for the other lives lost in the process. It feels so good to have something to actually analyze. Do you understand what this means? Can you feel it? Game of Thrones has cohesive themes again. We're back in 8th grade book report town. Let's fucking go. How incredible is Paddy in this scene, by the way? So a lot of people are talking about potential maester interference with this whole thing. Like, the only reason Viserys thinks Emma is going to die is because Mellos says she is. Mellos has the kid, and the thing turns out dead in the end. Knowing how an unstable succession favors certain political actors at court, and that Mellos is buddy-buddy with this Otto man, it's not so much of a leap to connect these dots. I wouldn't say it's cut and dry by any means, more just a possibility, but keep it in mind going forward. As with Game of Thrones, the politics in House of the Dragon's pilot is built around the death of an Arryn. By the shores of the Blackwater, Emma Arryn and Balon Targaryen are committed to ashes. Matt Smith's decision to play his part as supportive and sympathetic further serves to layer his character, and Millie Alcock's performance of this speech in a made-up language is just great. My favorite bit is when she almost says the fire word, but chokes on it. Heeding her uncle's words, she turns to see that her father needs her, regardless of the resentment she now harbors towards him, and she summons the courage to have her mother burned. Unfortunately, the dragon flame itself looks kinda off, so -4 out of 10, and this entire show is woke nonsense. We go immediately to another council scene. Otto is quick to raise the issue of succession, and he doesn't give a shit what others might have to say.
The king has an heir, my lord has.
Despite how difficult.
See, he just speaks over the goddamn sea snake. How very dare you! It's important to note that until Otto brings it up, there is no succession issue. Corlys, Lionel Strong, and Viserys all believe without question that Daemon is and should be the heir. It's only Otto and Mellos who rock that boat. Mellos suggests that Daemon might kill Viserys for the throne, which the king doesn't respond lightly to. Daemon, watching from the shadows, laughs to himself. Then there's this gem.
The gods have yet to make a man who lacks the patience for absolute power, your grace.
Bars, Otto, bars! Also, unfathomable levels of projection, but mainly bars.
The gods have yet to make a man who lacks the patience for absolute power, your grace.
I love how Viserys stares at Otto after this, like, what the fuck did you just say? Otto suggests making Rhaenyra the heir. Lionel's like, that's not how this works. How is she supposed to govern without the governing organ? But Mello says that's only how it is because that's how it is. The squabbling increases, Corlys explains to the audience the nuances of Rhaenys' claim, and then things come to a boil and Viserys has had enough.
My wife and son are dead!
Love this.
They have my son!
Otto pens a letter to Oldton and has it sent through Mellos, so expect that to be something. Otto thinks not enough fucked up shit has happened in this episode, so he manipulates Alicent into manipulating Viserys. Just like any normal person who definitely isn't suffering from severe depression, Viserys has dedicated half of his living space to a weird thing. In this case, a glorious white city with the same Valyrian architecture as Dragonstone. It could be Valyria itself, maybe known to Viserys by his connection to Balerion, or it could be a city he dreamt of. In any case, it needs to be at least 3 times bigger than this. So Alicent peels at her cuticles when she's anxious at the tourney, she bites her nails at other nervous moments, and when she rocks up at Viserys' crib, she scratches her fingers along the book and she's all fidgety. All through the episode, she's consistently characterized as anxious and uncertain, awkward and uncomfortable. Listen to her spit out these words to Viserys.
I thought I might come and look in on you, Your Grace.
And her voice is all strained throughout this scene. For the record, I think this is very good, in case that wasn't obvious. Daemon finds himself in a very HBO scene that I can't play on YouTube. He doesn't seem too happy until Mysaria asks him to be. This guy really knows how to command a room. Otto recounts what happens next, and so we don't see the tone of how Daemon says the heir for a day. Otto says it's celebratory, but it could just as well be melancholic and sympathetic. As a result, Viserys forces Daemon from court and names Rhaenyra his heir. See, in the book Fire and Blood, the heir for a day incident is ambiguously sourced. It's unclear how the story got to Viserys' ears. And furthermore, there's nothing about anyone pushing him to do something about succession. He just becomes wrathful at Daemon and casts him aside. But Fire and Blood was written by Maesters, and House of the Dragon isn't. We've removed the factor of the unreliable narrator, and so now we see that Otto and Mellos manipulate Viserys to consider altering the succession, and then Otto specifically tells him about the thing. Why would Otto want to do this? Just wait and see. The scene in the throne room is, I'm pretty sure, the best scene? It's tough to say. Emma's murder was so impactful. I love watching the gears turn in Daemon's head when he's asked if he said it. By the way, one last time, Considine is fantastic.
You chose to celebrate your own rise!
As is Smith.
10 years you've been king, and yet not once have you asked me to be your hand.
This scene is just as explosive as it should be. They love each other, but they don't know how to navigate their relationship. Maybe my favorite line in the whole episode is this, when Daemon describes Otto, but incidentally describes himself as well.
A cunt. A second son who stands to inherit nothing he doesn't seize for himself.
He speaks truth. He tells his brother what we've all witnessed for the past 50 minutes. He's weak and easily manipulated. It just so happens that in his one moment of strength, Viserys casts away the only remaining family he has outside of his carefree daughter. The Iron Throne cuts Viserys. The danger of power made an issue of the flesh. This is Blackfire, by the way. Everyone say hi to Blackfire. At the skull of the Black Dread, Viserys beckons his daughter. The king admits his quest for a son has been futile, dangerous, and wasteful. He already had an heir, he now realizes. Viserys emphasizes the immense nature of what he's saying. The throne is dangerous, yes, but there's also an apocalyptic prophecy we'll get to soon. Rhaenyra learning of this is intercut with her formal swearing in as heir, with oaths we see sworn by Corlys Velaryon, Hobart Hightower, Boromir Baratheon, and Rickon Stark. Presumably this one knows how to zigzag. There is nothing triumphant about Rhaenyra becoming her father's heir. This is daunting. Meanwhile, Daemon makes off with his side piece on Dragonback. Caraxes taking flight is, of course, all I ever wanted. Look at his big, dumb, goofy neck and his weird fucking hind wings. I love him. Okay, so that was the plot of the final scene, but we should probably stop to talk about the prophetic shit. Earlier in the episode, Viserys told Aemma about his dream. I glossed over it at the time because I am lazy. He dreamt their son would be born with a crown and he would place him on the Iron Throne and there'd be thundering of hooves and all the dragons roaring as one. So that didn't all work out. Except kinda? Prophecy is wacky. The child was born and there was the thundering of hooves and the roaring of dragons and the placing of his child in line to the throne. Viserys felt all these things and it seems he interpreted them in a specific way. I mention all this because the same could be true of Aegon's dream that he tells Rhaenyra about in this scene. The Song of Ice and Fire.
Aegon called his dream the Song of Ice and Fire.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
You know what? Giving your dream a name is pretty Chaddick. I'll give him that. This raised a lot of alarm bells among fans because, oh no, they're talking about the White Walkers, and after all of this wonderful writing, oh no! Begone, foul thing! He's basically asking Rhaenyra if she's seen Game of Thrones. But here's the thing, I don't think Viserys is talking about Game of Thrones, I think he's talking about A Song of Ice and Fire.
A Song of Ice and Fire.
There are a lot of little hints that some Targaryens are vaguely aware of apocalyptic prophecy, and Gurm has hinted that Aegon was motivated by this. House of the Dragon does seem a lot more in line with book canon, especially now that Gurm has a lot more oversight at Hebo. So, I don't know, I'm a little worried, but I'm also excited about where this idea could go over time. How they're going to try to tie in the old gods and the White Walkers and the song into the story of fire and blood. More to the point, I'm interested in how this prophecy passes down.
This secret, it's been passed from king to heir since Aegon's time.
Rhaegar was obsessed with prophecy, but from what we know, he and Aemon were unclear on what exactly was going on, so perhaps this prophecy was lost to the Targaryens between this time and Aemon's time. Maybe the events of House of the Dragon will see this dire knowledge fade away, but how did it get to Viserys? Aegon's heir was Aenys, sure. Maegor's line never continued, so that's not an issue, but Joe was never anyone's heir. Who told him? Some have said Aenys would have told Aegon, would have told Rhaena, would have told Joe, but from what we know about Rhaena, I don't know, maybe, I guess? I do enjoy that this promise asked by Viserys of Rhaenyra,
promise me this, Rhaenyra. Promise me.
Is directly compared with the promise asked by Lyanna of Ned about Rhaegar's heir, Jon.
Promise me, Ned. Promise me.
I adore the music playing over all this, by the way. I want to do something to it. It's so striking. That opening minor second in the piano shows the tension and the struggle Rhaenyra faces in this moment and going forward, and its resolution down to a minor third. You know what? Let's just keep the music theory to its own videos. Just know that Javadi is a master. The last thing I want to talk about is how the last scene ties up the themes of the episode. Firstly, the danger of power. Starting with the gloomy air at the Great Council of Harrenhal, continuing to Viserys' wounds, the implicit threats made by Otto and Melos, and ending with Rhaenyra learning of the greatest danger at the exact moment she is made the heir to the greatest power. I think that's pretty plain to see. More importantly though, is the theme of gender in relation to power. Oh no, I'm talking about gender on the internet. Think back to Harrenhal and how Condor deliberately reframed the choice between Viserys and Rhaenys as being entirely about their gender. Think of the freedom Princess Rhaenyra enjoys because of her dragon riding, and contrast that with the anxiety of Alicent, who's bound to manipulation in the patriarchal system. Think of Emma's resigned streamlined attitude to being a baby factory, of Viserys' choice to gruesomely murder his wife so that he might have a son. Then think of the intercutting between the loss of life in the battlefield of men and of women. Think of Viserys finally accepting that he has always had an heir in Rhaenyra. And lastly, think that all of these decisions were made not by George when he wrote Fire and Blood, but by Condell and the team working on this show. The streamlined adaptation of this theme is so well written that I can scarcely believe it exists in the same franchise as this.
Well, Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
So yeah, I'm not here to say this is the greatest piece of television ever, just it's a promising start to House of the Dragon, and given what we saw from this franchise in its last outing, that has me very pleased. Ryan Condell has done such a great job transforming this honestly somewhat boring history book into a story about humans so far in this one episode. But you know what they're actually missing? Been a while, hasn't it, kids? In short, yeah, it's pretty good, you could say. Please don't fuck it up. Part 3. Goodbye. Here are my patrons. Check out the second channel. I've been uploading stuff to it. See you next week.
They're going to bring the bay up and
Start the damn tits before I piss myself.